Hello, good day to one and all. This is Miss A. Krishna Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Mancheri. Today we are going to discuss a poem from the paper Post-Colonial Writings. So the title of the poem here is So What If I Live in a House Made by Idiots? And the poem is written by ALAMGIR HASHMI. So let's have a brief look at the biography of the author, ALAMGIR HASHMI. His maiden name is Aurangzeb ALAMGIR HASHMI. He is an Anglo-Pakistani poet and was born in 1951 in Pakistan. He studied at the University of Punjab, Lahore, and is a poet who has gained great popularity. He is a great humanist and an educator in many universities. He has taught in many North American universities and in many European countries. He is an English professor and he also teaches anthropology and psychology. He has produced many literary works, including poetic collections and critical writings. So here is a poem. So what if I live in a house made by idiots? So you can pause the video and you can read the poem once or twice before we get into the real discussion. So before switching on to the poem, let's go through the poetic style of this writer. Now, most of his poems can be considered as a true reflection of the society we live in, which means he gives a realistic representation. He brings life to his verses through satire. So if you look at most of his poems, they are not very serious kind of poems. They take a satirical mode, but at the same time, they convey some powerful images. Through humor, he discusses the modern life. His language is plain and simple, but at the same time, it is intense and powerful. He stands as a representative of the marginalized and he brings into light his own life. So his poems are just like memoirs, or it can be considered as partly autobiographical. So what is this poem about? Now this poem is an outcry regarding the pathetic situation of the marginalized people in a country. The title of the poem is a question which paves way to multiple interpretations. The poem is written in a humorous tone and there is no rhyme scheme employed, and it is written in blank verse. So let's take a look at the initial lines of the poem. So what if I live in a house made by idiots? So as you can see, the title looks quite fascinating and interesting. So the entire poem runs with the metaphor of house. So this is the first thing that we have to decipher. What is this house, or what is this house actually representing? What is the other possible meaning that you can attach with this house? Now by house, here Hashmi means his country or his nation. So what if I live in a house made by idiots? A nation is actually built by its leaders, definitely by its political leaders. So here Hashmi is in fact criticizing his country. He is criticizing the condition in which his country is confined to in today's world. So since a nation is built by its leaders, a nation can become a real nation only if it gets very good leaders. So here he says that his house has been made by idiots. So that's a very direct call against the political leaders of his country. So what if I live in a house made by idiots? So that's a question which is posed to the readers. In the last one, which means in the last house where he resided, so he's definitely talking about his country, holes were filled with toothpaste. So look at the suffocating condition. The holes were filled with toothpaste was so airtight, breathing became a task. So, this is something very important because breathing became a task. So, you have to imagine the suffocating condition inside this house. And this house stands for his country. Now, there is a lot of difference between the term house and home. Now, house is actually the physical construction, it is just the physical entity. But at the same time, a home is a feeling. A home is where human beings interact, and home is a place where there is togetherness, love, affection, care, understanding, sacrifice, etc. So, home is actually a combination of everything and it stays close to your heart. But house means it is very distant from your mind. Wherever you live, that is a house. So it is just a physical construction. But when it gets associated with emotions and feelings, it becomes a home. And more than that, a home often provides some kind of safety and security for the people living inside. But here the poet says his country is not like a home, but his country is just like a house. His nation is just like a house, which is just a physical construction made and maintained for the benefit of its leaders, the political leaders. So he says within this house, it was so airtight that breathing became a task. Now, breathing is something which is very natural. And such a natural thing is becoming a difficult task. Now, sometimes we do not know how many times we breathe in a minute or how many times we breathe in an hour. This is because we do not really care about that because it is a natural thing which is happening automatically. But here, breathing is becoming difficult. So just imagine the suffocation that the people feel within this place. If bomb shelter were excellent and made you feel ready. So he's talking about bomb shelters here. So maybe the house that he mentions in the second line can be a bomb shelter. Now, since his country is a country which is always tumultuous, which is always unstable, with a lot number of problems, he is definitely talking about the context of an attack or a war. If bomb shelter were excellent and made you feel ready. Now look at the terms used. Now excellent is a positive term and feeling ready is again a positive term. But with these two positive terms, he is actually talking about the intensity of negativity. He says the bomb shelter is really good and this really made the people feel ready. Now here, feeling ready is actually negative in its sense because the people are getting ready for an attack at any time. Anything can happen at any time. So it is not a wonderful feeling. It is a very difficult kind of situation. Now I would like to take you to some pictures. Now you can see the first one is actually known as a bunker. Now this is again a bomb shelter and this is an individual shelter. Now, an individual can place himself or herself within this bunker when there is a bomb attack. Now, the second picture is something which is more vaster than the very first one. Now, these were used during the Second World War period. Now, in the second one, whenever there is a news of an attack, all the people would be dumped inside this bomb shelter so that you can save your life. But look at the picture here. It's completely closed and there is one single door here at the center and even this door would be closed. So just imagine it would be dark inside, it would be suffocating and the people's life can be protected. That is the only positive thing here. But imagine if people should stay inside such a bunker for days and months. Life becomes really difficult. So this is a condition that he is talking about here. So there is no safety and security. Every minute you are worried about an attack. So the difficult scenario of the marginalized or the common people or the ordinary people in a country is discussed here. So the poet discusses the dilapidated condition of the houses where he survived. He would be possibly talking about some camps in Pakistan. So a camp, you can imagine, you might have seen in media or channels regarding the flood camps that we had in Kerala 2 years back. Now, camps usually would be crowded. You won't get all the facilities, and it will not be a very smooth sail when you are inside a camp. You are remaining inside a camp only to protect your life. So it could be a shelter during the war period. Here, in connection with Hashmi's poem, the holes represent the void and emptiness remaining in their lives. The walls, which were filled with toothpaste, were so suffocating that they could hardly breathe. So, breathing is becoming a difficult task. He describes that these houses were used as shelters from bombs and always kept the people ready to face an attack. So, always getting ready to face an attack is not a very interesting kind of thing. So, in the very first stanza, you understand the suffocation that the poet feels. Moving on to the next stanza. This has the walls wet. Now, when he uses the term this, the readers are really getting confused because we do not know whether he is talking about the same country, the same house, or whether he is talking about a different house. Now, if it is a different house, definitely it could be his country where he had migrated to. So we know that he later moved on to England and later he has been in America. So we do not know whether he is talking about those countries. Or sometimes it can be the same country which he had mentioned in the previous stanza, that is his home country. This has the walls wet, from tears it causes. So the walls of this house is remaining wet because of the tears. Now, tears could be tears flowing from the people residing in it. And sloughs every 3 months. Sloughs means, slough here is something like a swamp or a wetland which is filled with water. So this is filled with water which comes from the tears of the people every 3 months. So there is a change which he mentions, like every 3 months something is happening. So this something that is happening can be equated with the political changes happening within the country. Now, if you look at the history of Pakistan, it's not a very fascinating history because there had been a lot of tumultuous situations and people had gone through a lot of trials and tribulations. So the people are not completely at peace always. So maybe that is what the poet is suggesting here. There is a political change which is coming every 3 months. The flow are the best thing in it. Get clean, for the monsoon might blow off the roof. So now he says the floor will look very clean when the monsoon might blow off the roof. Now see, he is mentioning monsoon season here, so possibly he is relating to his own home country rather than his migrated country. So he says during the monsoon season, the roof might be blown off and water rushes into the house. So automatically the floor gets cleaned. Yet, you can imagine a house without a flow? So he is asking another question here to the readers. Can you imagine a house without a flow? Now, a house without a flow implies a system or democracy built upon without a foundation or an inherent heritage. So there is no base for this country. This country is baseless without a foundation. This is what he tries to mean here. So you can imagine a house without a floor. So he's asking whether you can imagine it, because it is impossible to imagine that kind of a country without any foundation in its democracy. The lawn now has a few flowers to his credit, but the grass keeps debiting. Now the lawn, so he is describing the exterior region, the outer region. The lawn now has a few flowers to his credit. So the few flowers here can mean the good-hearted people, because wherever you go, you can see different kinds of people. You can see good people as well as bad people. So here he is talking about the leaders, the political leaders. Even among the political leaders, there can be good leaders who are working for the benefit of the citizens of the country. So he says, still there are a few flaws, but the grass keeps debiting. The grass keeps debiting. Debit means debit, credit, you might know the meaning. Debit means it is getting removed. You are taking up something. The grass keeps debiting. The municipal waters give it further lease, and the insects introduces. So he's talking about the exterior condition, the municipal water which is actually coming to this lawn and it is remaining stagnant there. So you can imagine it as dirty water, stagnant water remaining in the exterior region, and stagnant water, which is polluted water, can bring in a lot of insects because it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes and insects. So in this stanza, the poet further goes on to say that the house has got wet walls due to the flowing tears of the people remaining there. These tears have further created swamps or wetlands. While the floors are cleansed by tears, the roof might blow off at any moment due to monsoon winds. So maybe he's suggesting a tropical climate here. The lawn is also completely destroyed, though the grass remains. A few flowers might suggest the remaining good hearts. The water from the municipality wets the dry grass and they invite insects to this outer area. So let's continue with the last part. And the insects introduces you. So that is how he begins. So in totality, we can see the situation here is physically and psychologically distressing. So the exterior area is completely filled with polluted water, and the insects introduces you minute by minute to part of yourself. Now this is a very interesting line because you are introduced to yourself. You are introduced to a part of yourself. Now how can that happen? Now he says, if you are living in these congested houses, polluted kind of houses, or sometimes within a bomb shelter, you suffocate and your mind becomes totally distressed. So your life is actually equivalent to a lifeless mode, which means you will be physically alive, you would be mentally alive, but you yourself will not be feeling the lively nature within yourself. And in such a condition, these insects, they come and bite you. And only when these insects bite you that you are reminded of your existence. So that's a beautiful line that he brings in. Minute by minute, you are introduced to part of yourself. So it is only the insect bite which can remind you of your own existence. Now comes the last two lines. The sun can kiss the face and the back of its deck at the same time. I call it a place to live. So these are the last lines, and here there is some kind of a possibility or a hope that the poet is trying to bring in. The sun can kiss the face and the back of its deck. Now you know what a deck is. Now deck is usually a concept you can see in foreign countries, specifically the European countries. You can see the picture here. A deck is a wooden platform of a house. Now this is an area where you can get a lot of bright sunlight because it is a place which brings in a lot of positive energy, hope, and happiness. So the sun can kiss the face and the back of its deck at the same time. So he says there is still hope for this country if the political leaders can think in a different way. And he says the sun can kiss. He is using the word can. He is not using the word will. He could have said the sun will kiss, which means it is sure that it will happen. But here he says the sun can kiss, which means there is hope. There is a possibility that the sun might do this, but it is not sure. So he's actually associating this with the political leaders of the country. The sun can kiss the face and the back of its deck. So maybe if the political leaders can think in a different way, they can really bring a change in the country. They can really revamp the entire country and bring a different name and a different glory for the country. At the same time, I call it a place to live. So finally, in the last part, there is a little bit of pessimism which is coming again. I call it a place to live. So all said and done, the poet says that I call it a place to live because there is no other option left for the poet. So this is the only place where he can continue living. This is his homeland. This is his country. So definitely he has got no other option, and therefore this is a place where I live. Now, this can be his own home country, or it can be the country of his migration. That is also a possibility. Now, if it is his migrated country, maybe he is talking about the adjustment problems that he would be facing there. Maybe the problems with the cultural amalgamation or the social kind of structural patterns. So maybe it's difficult for someone from the Asian side to start their life completely afresh in a European country. So maybe he is also talking about this migrated country, but it is not made clear in the poem. So we have to assume that either it is his own home country or it could be the migrated country. So the utter senselessness is depicted within the concept of a house. The house remains just as a physical entity. It lacks the warmth of a home which relies on human relationships. The warm sunlight can touch the people's faces as well as the deck of the house, and finally they are compelled to call this as their house. The poem is all about the disillusionment and dissatisfaction in the mind of the poet. So if you look at the poem in general, what is the ultimate truth that the poet is trying to place here? A home is a place which gives you security and safety. But that safety is not guaranteed by these places where they live under horror continuously. So terrorism is also something which is a part of this country, and this is also something which is actually keeping the people out of peace. So the deep sense of vacuum that the poet feels lingers on throughout the poem. He criticizes the nation's government for its failure to uphold the human values. Now, some of the images used in the poem, the holes filled with toothpaste denoting the condition of the house, the mental state of those people living there. So it is associated with the suffocation of the people living there. Now, wet walls can indicate an unhappy face with tears. Again, the terms like slough, blow off, all these are negative terms. So, a house without a flow, it is just like a body without a soul. Just like a country without any values, it is just like a body without a soul. So some of the questions that you can expect from this poem: how does Hashmi portray the senselessness around him? So it is through the metaphor of a house. So you can explain that. Discuss the plight of the marginalized as described by Hashmi. So you can mention the situation, the bomb shelter, the psychological and physical distress, and how they suffocate within these houses. Discuss the symbols used by the poet. The main symbol is the house itself. Again, the holes filled with toothpaste, sloughs, and the flowers in the lawn, and how the insects remind you of the existence. So you can include all these things. Now, significance of the title. The title is written in a humorous way, but it is actually giving a real impact with the more intense, bigger themes which are discussed within. The poem is an outcry of the sidelined crowd. Elucidate. The poet stands as a representative of the marginalized people, and therefore he is actually describing the situation of the ordinary citizens within this country. So with this we come to the end of this session. Now I can send the poem in the comment box so that if you want it separately, you can copy paste it somewhere else. So I shall place the poem here in the comment box. So thank you very much for your patient listening. If you have got any questions or queries, please do not feel hesitant to connect with me. So thank you, girl. Thank you very much.